My ambition since taking over the helm on Perspective has been to provide you with an opportunity to hear a wide range of political perspectives so that you can make up your mind over the core issues that affect our lives. I always try to ensure the perspectives you hear on the show are balanced with alternatives either within an episode or over several weeks, so please do listen to next week's show for that balance. While a significant majority of climate scientists are increasingly alarmed by the rapid pace of climate change, a growing proportion of voters across Europe are voting to stop climate action. That pleases my guest, Paul Burgess, who describes himself as a climate scientist and friend of 4 times jailed far-right politician Tommy Robinson. You may be vehemently opposed to what he says, or perhaps one of his biggest supporters. Either way, Mr. Burgess's views represent those of many people both here and across Europe, and they should, in my view, be heard and scrutinised.
Like, climate science is a very, very wide field. It's to do with the study of the climate, obviously. But you can study climate as a geologist going back in time. You can study the climate as a statistician going into models. You can study the climate as the most important branch of science that studies climate is physics. So, for example, you've got Nobel Prize winners at the moment studying climate, yes? So, my work, so I could go on, there's lots more disciplines than that. Now, my work was branched into it in this way. I did what we call hydroclimatology. So my job was for a cold country, and sometimes at UK level, to plan water resource systems. So what were the droughts? What's the probability of a drought? How big can the drought be? How big can the flood be? How frequent will it be? So to do that, you have to study climate. Now, in the studying of that climate, by accident in the 70s, I analysed river flows and found the effect of this 11-year sun cycle. So I uncovered, I was the first to do it, the 11-year sun cycle, and it was a very strong signal in the river flows. So at that point I realised, just the sort of factors. Now, in the 1970s, when I was doing this work, it was a cooling period. It cooled from the 1940s to the 1970s. So I'm 79, so I've got this as, and now in that period, people were predicting the Ice Age was coming. There was a big scare about it. In fact, scientists wrote and said, let's put soot over the Arctic to absorb the heat and melt it, because an Ice Age is coming. And that was because of the cooling. And the funny part is, in the middle of that cooling, we had the 1976 drought. And I was the water resource engineer for Wales at that time. So the funny thing is, when you get cold weather, you get more extreme weather, which I can go into. But in my work, I only use proper sources and proper data, and I quote the sources all the time. And so that's who I am. So that's why I'm a climate scientist. Now, I don't like using the term. In fact, almost most proper scientists don't, because they prefer to be called physics or geologist or so, but they are climate scientists, yes? So because I do hydroclimatology, I'm a climate scientist.
So the next charge that has been flying around on social media is that in some way you are connected to far-right groups in the UK. Straight out, are you a member of a far-right organisation?
No, I'm not. I'm not a member of any party at all. I'm not a member of any political party. And the reason, I have political views, but the reason I'm not is because my climate work, which I do, I don't want to be, because the trouble is, instead of it being science, the nearer you get science to politics, the less science you get, right? One of the golden rules of science. So I've decided not to be a member of any party. So I'm not today a member of any party, but I want to address all the points, right?
Yeah. So I mean, the key point is, I think, was it an interview you did with Tommy Robinson?
No. Yes and no. Let me explain. I was very keen. I campaigned before I was doing too much of this. I campaigned on Brexit. I wanted the sovereignty of the UK, and my argument was simple: sovereignty. And so I was invited by the leader of UKIP to join them in it was 10 or 15, 20,000 people in London, and I was behind the scenes on that. And Tommy Robinson spoke at that, right? And I was introduced to him. And as a character, he fascinated me. Now, I also make documentaries. I have a full broadcast studio. So he fascinated me. So I said, can I make a documentary on you? And actually, he was worried at first. But he said he would. And so I had him one day's filming, but out of that I got 3 50-minute episodes, right, called The Real Tommy Robinson. Now, as a documentary maker, I wanted to be totally honest. So I had to deal with every crime he's committed. Yes? So the video starts from as a baby and goes through any crimes he's committed, without any exceptions, right? Because that was part of it. Yeah? So I make 3 50-minute... It got 1 million views in a week before it was banned, of course, because, yeah. But in doing that, I realised that he's been subject to totally unfair treatments by the law. I mean, truly unfair. And I've got it on film, the unfairness. And they say, there it is, you judge. So, right? Recently, this last year, he asked me, would I like to be interviewed? He's done over 100 interviews with boxers, with politicians, with everyone. And it does Tommy Robinson interview. So I actually just went, I didn't go into politics. I went through my life story. So I went through a life story with Tommy Robinson, yes? And what they're saying is association, oh, it's bad. But they don't know what he's like. You know, now I personally know him, for example, and I don't betray friends. And he's a friend. Because I personally witnessed he's the least racist person I know. You know, when he started the EDL and all that, and he did lots of mistakes, don't get me wrong, I covered them. But if I make a film on the Taliban, it doesn't mean to say I support the Taliban, right? You must know that. You don't support everything you hear over podcast. So there's that. So what are my politics? Well, today my politics would be, I'd be described as right-wing. I fought racism all my life. It really hurt me, that. So, I'm sorry, So all my life, I fight for the truth.
Yeah.
So I come across what's happening in my own career. By the way, I was on government committees and everything. You know, yeah. I've been on Quangos. I've had them disbanded by my work, and so I'm pretty good at going in and looking at a subject and finding the root of it. And so when I was invited to the Isle of Man by a group, I came to the Isle of Man, and in my wildest dreams I didn't believe that the calculations would be so bad. They're 200 to 300% out. And this is, I can explain this to anybody. It's so simple.
Let's go into this then. Yeah. From an Isle of Man government perspective, we've just had some fairly substantial price hikes in oil and gas.
Yes.
We don't have any oil and gas of our own. Yeah. Isle of Man government, it seems to make sense, would you not agree, for us to have more control over our energy? From an economic perspective, it makes sense for an independent country.
Yes and no. How much of this equipment in this room was manufactured in the Isle of Man?
Very little, I would suspect.
How many cars on the roads are manufactured in the Isle of Man? So you have to be careful when you say that. What I would argue for the Isle of Man is sensible, which I think you've had a very sensible energy policy up to now, by the way, is I think it should be independent. I think it should be as independent as possible. And I think you've done a very good job with the closed circuit gas turbine station and with the backup by diesel, because you get big peaks here because of TT and things. So you've done a very good job on that. Yeah. So that's where we are on that. And but just by, you have to define it. But even when you have wind. Now, this is really important. I in a video I did for the Isle of Man before I came out, because I warned them, yes, when a video I did, I quoted a green organisation, a pro-green organisation, and they said every analyst understands this, that when you mix wind, the only backup is gas. The only backup is gas. And if you take the UK, we had wind when the Ukraine war happened, yeah? We had wind. And that wind did save us some money because the gas price just went off the roof. But now it's come down. Now gas price in the UK is £65. That is higher than it should be because wind forces it to be higher. I'll explain that. But they've just accepted £246 a megawatt hour, not 65, for floating offshore wind, which is it's actually 6 times what it should be and 4 times what it is today. So this idea is cheap is wrong. If you take all the countries in the world with a mixture of, then the ones that have got the most wind are the most expensive.
So then the obvious question then has to be, why would any government do this? I mean, people elect governments.
Correct.
Governments tend to be very transparent. Certainly in the Isle of Man, from experience, I know that there's nothing you can do in the Isle of Man without someone finding out about it. So why would they choose to invest in a more expensive electricity generation
All right,
system.
then I'll put it to you this way. You could argue way back that governments and universities did PhDs in witchcraft and things, and so on. So the fact is that if America disappeared, if Canada disappeared, if South America disappeared, let's get rid of all that landmass on the west. Let's get Europe to disappear and the UK, and I'm going to include the Isle of Man. So all of those have gone below the waves. CO2 would continue to increase at an incredible rate. That is just a fact, right?
So how would that happen?
Because China and India and the Far East, you see, when we had the 2016 conference, China. By the way, if you plot all those conferences on a CO2 curve, they don't even dent it. They make no difference at all. But in that 2016 one, China was given to 2030, and it could do what it wanted, build as many coal, which it's doing. It's building dozens a month and things. And those will continue after 2030. They're not going to close them all, right? And the same for India, right? So these countries are going to go ahead no matter what.
But it is fair to say also that China is leading in relation to renewable energy as well.
Yes, in a way, yeah, because they're selling us our destruction. That's a great thing they've got going, actually. What China have got going...
But they are embracing it themselves as well.
No, they're not. No, they're doing a bit. No. You can't say... Look, the point that you're missing, I think, is I've just pointed out that no matter what the West does, no matter what it does, it has no effect. It doesn't change anything. So to argue to spend money and to export industries, we just exported our high-quality steel industry. So now we've got to bring it in from China across the oceans, increasing the CO2, by the way. But, it doesn't make sense. So you asked me a question, why are the politicians doing this if it's so wrong, right? And by the way, that report I was talking about showed that now, if you take the last 5 years in the UK and you operate it with the wind and without the wind, if we'd not had the wind, we'd be 18 billion better off. So, in actual fact, it was only temporary that. Yes, that gain was only temporary.
And which report was that again?
Pardon?
Which report was that?
It's on my website. So I've done it on. I've got it on. I've got 10,000 or 20,000 references on my discs. Yeah. But I put it on my website. Okay. It's not on my website, on my YouTube channel where I discuss it. Right. So But this report also a report which I did in the Isle of Man one, and I quoted it, and I gave you the reference, said when you mix gas and wind, you're more reliant on gas than you were before. Because now what you've done, let's take the Isle of Man. You've got a gas station. When the wind stops, like today, you wouldn't be getting anything. Yeah? You wouldn't be getting anything. So you'd have a gas station that would be fully manned all year, that has the same structure, the same overheads, the same people, right? And it's got to be kept running in the background, and you haven't got the fastest gas. There's an open cycle which is fast to do back up the wind, or there's closed cycle which is slower. So you've got to keep it wasting gas at a higher level, doing nothing. Right. So in actual fact, your cost per unit you produce it's less productive, and it puts the price of gas up. So around about the estimate in the UK, again, that's on my videos, the estimate is 25% of the current gas price is due to the fact that you're saying to them, we want you in the next minute, but we don't want you then, and we do want you then. Any business that's operated like that has to put its price up. If you think about it, just common sense. So a mixture is the worst thing you can have. And the battery cost for the Isle of Man is 3,780 millions. I mean, it's 3.7 billion.
Of course, the assumption is that nothing better comes along.
No, you can't plan a country's welfare on a hope about. So I'm not assuming that. Other people might assume it, but I wouldn't, because you can't plan on a wing and a prayer. And when you look at what's happening on the horizon, like hydrogen, they're all ridiculous. But you can't plan on something you haven't got, especially what we rely on energy. Why the world has gone from the desperate state it was in the 1800s to now is because we've had energy, cheap energy, and that enabled one man to do 100 men's work.
And is that part of the problem, that maybe we're just over-consuming nowadays, and perhaps
it's not, because we're not. You're inventing things there. Look.
Well, I don't know. From my personal point of view, I have a house. Yeah. If I left all the windows open and kept the boiler running, it's going to cost me a lot more than if I closed the windows, insulated the home, insulated the roof, and actually had a reasonably airtight house. So it would save me money. That money that I save, I would then spend in the local economy. So it makes sense for me to do that. So
it makes sense to me as well.
So asking it in the way then about, are we using too much energy? Is it that because we've had access to relatively cheap and easy energy that we tend to be less bothered about squandering it?
Yeah, the answer's within your question. You said I wouldn't do that, I'd waste a lot of money. And I agree on house insulation and all that, and I do agree on stopping waste. Obviously I do. No one's arguing with that. But the point you're making is, economically, you controlled yourselves. And that's what controls it in the end, is the economics. Now, if the gas price rises and rises, there's a pressure on. And let me give you an example. There's a certain small reactor, 5 megawatt, that lives off the old waste. The old nuclear industry has got this long-term waste. Some of it's 10,000 years before it's safe. Some of it's 300. They take the 10,000 year, cycle it, and burn that. That's their fuel. And then they output it as 300. So they're changing 10,000, which is a big problem, so they're cleaning up the planet. That's their fuel, right? And that is an incredible thing. It's called the stable salt reactor. And that can be transported on the back of a truck. A 5 megawatt can come in on a low loader, on the ferry. Yeah. So and it can't melt down. It's not possible to melt down. It's safe. So you've got things like that. So I'm all for serious things like that, planning forward. But if you look at hydrogen and things, it's collapsing already. I don't have to do anything. All the projects are collapsing. And even the committee of MPs just declared that it's got no future except in very niche things in industry. And that's it. So you can't plan on a wishy-washy basis. My concern above all, when I've come here, is honestly for the well-being of the Isle of Man, how much it's going to cost you all.
You're listening to Perspective with controversial climate commentator Paul Burgess. You have questioned the figures that Isle of Man government has been using. Now, I must say at this point, obviously I have an interest in that. I am possibly going to be a close neighbour to some very large wind turbines. So that conflict declared, but I also have an interest in that. I was minister at the time that the report that you've quoted from was produced. So let's drill into some of these figures.
Good. Then. Let me explain. When you have a wind vane, it takes the energy from the speed of the wind, the velocity of the wind, and converts it into electricity. No one can argue with that. Now, the way it does that is simple physics. Right? And no matter how efficient the wind vane, because there's different, one will say I'm 2% more efficient and all that. It doesn't matter what I'm saying. So it doesn't matter what the model is. Right? When the wind comes in, the energy is proportional to the velocity of the wind cubed. Now what that means is this, that if I've got a small drop in the wind from its target, so let's say, and it's perfect level, we'll use percentages. I'm getting the full 20 in this case, 100%. If I drop to 10%, then all I've got to do is anyone now, I'll do it now on this, anyone can take a calculator and say I've dropped by 10%. How much does the energy drop? And it's 0.9 times 0.9 times 0.9. And the answer is it goes down to 72%. So you've only dropped 10%, but your energy has just gone.
And why is that?
Right, it's because it's the cube. It's because it depends on the velocity to cube. Yes, so it rises quickly and falls quickly away from the peak. So if you half it, you've only got an eighth left. It reduces to an eighth of the power. So you don't get any. So it's got a very small band indeed when it's producing its proper, let's say 100%. Very, very small. Yes. So you've got the variations in the wind. So you get what's called a factor. What percentage do we get out? Now, if anyone listening to this wants to do this, get a phone out. You're getting 20 megawatt turbines. All you do, 20 times 24, I'll do it live here, times 365, that's the days in a year. Then it comes to 175 gigawatts, 175, 200 megawatts. Yeah, that's 175. You're getting out 85% of that, you're claiming, up to, or you're getting out 74, or you're getting out 57. I've got them right here. Yeah, Now, today, that's what you're saying. The British government says in Scotland, or windiest places, typically you get 28.4.
So why would
Hold on, I haven't finished. It's really important.
Well, why would the Isle of Man government claim
three times
that it's 3 times more than that?
Because they've made a mistake in the maths. Now, it's as simple as that. The entire programme you've got has to be dropped. And you have to stop and think, because everything you've been told on costs, on everything, is wrong. Right? It's simply wrong.
Is it possible that you've misunderstood
it's not.
The figures
All
they're
right,
presenting?
then, let me explain. The British government say Scotland's 28.4. So then there's a pile of wind farms in Scotland, and I just went down the first 7, and it's just random, I didn't choose them. And these are the wind farm yields. This is the percentage you get out of that 100% figure. 28.2, 28.4, 29.3, 23.8, 34, that's a good one, 19.7, 24.8, 26.85. So it backs up government figures.
And
so
these
are government figures from the British...
Those figures represent what exactly?
The total amount of energy they produce.
Right.
It includes the energy. Some of them are paid 51% of the time not to give it. Right, but it includes that. So it's the total energy.
And of course, that's one thing that the MUA has been very keen to point out, that they would not pay themselves not to run their turbines.
No. What it is, if your wind is too much overnight, if the demand drops overnight and you've got more wind, in the UK we still have to pay. And as we increase wind, by the way, we're heading into a disaster, because we're going to be paying 4 to 5 times for it what we need. Yeah, at times we've paid 50 and 100 times the price of power to try to balance the grid, right? And what you're saying is, but we're publicly owned. No, you're wrong, because now your calculation of yield comes down, because my calculations of 20% and all this I've told you, right, are based on the whole lot. If you add wind, now your first 20 doesn't matter because it's well below your night time. But if you go to the 48, add the other one, you then enter that world, so your efficiency drops. So all your claims about that price drop. It's simple engineering. So even that's wrong, I'm afraid. But the reason why I'm right, and the reason why Isle of Man's got to change, and I'm being black and white about this, is because Ireland is the same, Scotland is the same, UK is the same, and nowhere in the world do you get anything like what you're talking about. So I'm using today's figures. The Green Party today said out of date. So I did another thing. I looked up a report. I don't know the Isle of Man. So someone found a report from you from 2010 that you happen to be involved with. I didn't know that when I sat down. And what did that report say? It found 10 locations across the Isle of Man, and whoever did it was sensible and knew the truth. And they came up between 19 and 31%, with an average of 25%. So that backs up me. What did I do in my videos before I arrived? I reckon you're about 27% there, right? Not 85, right? It is not possible. I'm giving you the facts, and those facts will change your entire plan, and the people who have done it have got to be accountable.
So, okay, the MUA, for whatever reason, and again, it would be interesting to understand what motivation they could possibly have, bearing in mind...
They don't. They're not doing it on purpose. They're being advised.
Bearing in mind that sooner or later we are going to know, if these turbines are built, we are going to know how efficient they are. Yeah. And
very expensive mistake by then.
Well, that's certainly your suggestion. Surely to goodness, bearing in mind the huge number of government failures, and this is not just about the Isle of Man, but across the world, and it's generally about large projects, that surely our government is going to take this seriously and ensure that it has consulted with suitable experts and has reliable figures.
This is so simple, it doesn't have to be an expert. It really doesn't. This is super simple. I'm declaring it openly, and I'm not hedging my bets, am I? I'm telling you what the facts are. I'm also telling you they will have to at some point. It's how much credibility they're going to lose. The longer they go on, they're going to lose more credibility. I believe they believe the figures. I don't think they're being dishonest, don't get me wrong, but people are being wedded, like the Green Party, to total things like, I want to use battery power at a cost of 3.7 billion. Pounds. Do you think the Isle of Man can afford 3.7 billion to back up? This is to back up your current day's power. That's all. Yeah. Can you afford that? No. And these are the real figures. And based on current prices.
And does, I mean, let's try and think about the future for energy on the Isle of Man or wherever you may be. Is there not? Is there a better way in which we can run our energy services? Is there?
Well, whoever invented or whoever created your thing, what you've got, and I mean, fair enough, you got a little bit of hydro. That's great. Take that first. That's cheap, and I love hydro. I'm a water resource engineer, so hydro is great, But the trouble is, you can't have any more of it. Norway's great for hydro, of course. So you can't have that. So you've got to keep that going because that's cheap, and then the answer is going to be gas in the end. Unless you go, as you evolve in the future, I see a small reactor coming, and that's very stable in that. But the trouble is the reactor can't cope with your demands because it takes days to start and stop it.
And presumably tidal power has the same problem.
Tidal power's yield factor is 12.5%.
Yeah.
Tidal and wave is 2.5%. That's been a total disaster. Yeah. Again. Don't forget I'm trained and qualified and all this. So those are silly things. I'm giving you the answer. But you see, if you have a base one of nuclear in the future, I'm going long term because you're already set up well at the moment. I wouldn't change it. But if you have a base load of nuclear, then you've got to have something to fast and vary on top of it. And the only thing is gas, unless you want to spend 3,870 whatever it is million. That's a lot of money. It's 3.7 billion.
You are currently sat opposite me with a I Love Carbon Dioxide badge on. Are you a denier of man-made climate change?
In the way it's presented, yes. I'll explain that. CO2 is an important greenhouse gas. CO2, forget the life part, you need it to breathe, but CO2 is a very important greenhouse gas, and we'd be a lot colder without it. It is important, and CO2 has warmed the planet. Yeah, I'll explain this tonight, and the alarmists don't disagree with me on this part, right? So this is really important because this is the heart of everything. We need more CO2. So hold on, you're telling me that you agree it warms the planet? Yes, and we need more of it. Doesn't make sense. You don't want the planet to warm. Well, in actual fact, I do. Let me explain. William Happer, Professor William Happer, was the scientific advisor to 3 presidents in the States. That doesn't mean a thing, but his work does. And he produced the model, which was checked against the satellite observation, and it proved faultless. And I show it tonight. And what it showed was that CO2 has, how can I put it? Imagine there are others, but imagine, methane does nothing. But imagine the CO2 grabs heat and reflects it back to Earth. And it reduces the amount of radiation leaving Earth. It does. Yeah? And water vapour does big time. But it only does it in a certain frequency of radiation. And the radiation passes through it otherwise. So imagine I have a little robot tonight, and it grabs the energy, grabs the radiation coming up, and expels it in 360 and sends it back to Earth off of it. That's your warming. But when you double it from now, you only add 1%. And the best way to explain this scientifically is it's like painting a wall red. If I ask you to paint a white wall red, the first coat, it'll be red. The second coat, it will be redder. The third coat, but after 4 coats, no matter how many you put on, and it's called the saturation curve. It was already at that in the Industrial Revolution times. So as we've added CO2, has it warmed the planet? Yes. By how much? Now, if we double it today, which we can't do, you're having enough fossil fuels, but if we double it today, you add 0.7 of a degree C. Right, so that's not going to happen. I haven't finished.
And well, what it would be helpful just to know what are you quoting here? Because presumably there is some science to back up.
Totally. Yeah. I'm quoting William Happer and Vingarden, Professor William Happer and Vingarden's radiative transfer model, and the other side doesn't disagree. We all agree on this. So the other side agrees on that science.
Because one thing that surprised me in the programme that you did. At the Man and Line programme was that you said you agreed with much of the science of the IPCC.
Yeah, I do. Oh, well, let me finish this. Yep. So it comes from there. The resources are in my videos, and I'll be revealed tonight. Right? Checked against observation. King, that's a king in science. The other side agrees. So if the other side agrees that it's only going to go up by 0.7, what are they talking about? And the answer is, this is where we disagree. They say the extra 0.7 creates more warming, yeah, and that creates more water vapour. And water vapour is a greenhouse gas that causes more warming and goes on, right? So they treble it. That's the difference between the two sides. So what I've told you now is the heart of everything. This is the heart of every single thing. So it trebles it. But it doesn't treble it because there's something we don't understand, and we know. So tonight I use NASA data on this. I use NASA, IPCC, Met Office. I use the lot tonight, right? And what it is clouds. If you're sunbathing on a beach and a cloud comes over, you will feel that cool straight away. I mean, a second, because you cut off the radiation from the sun. But that radiation's still coming down, but it gets reflected back into space by the clouds. And that's worth about, that radiation reflect is worth about 12 C, according to NASA. But it also makes you warmer because it's an insulation layer. The cloud insulates you. And that's worth 5 degrees C. Sorry, that's worth 7 degrees C. The difference between the two is 5 degrees C. And that, it means we have a net cooling effect of clouds. So we're talking about 0.7. So 7 times more effective than the whole effect of the CO2 is the controlling thermostat of clouds. Now, no one, including the professors I've quoted, they're trying, has modelled clouds, right? But they're trying to do it. But we know the general picture, which I've just explained, so I use the NASA data for. Now, I also use IPCC data. Now, let me explain something about extreme weather, for example, because, and I've got it here, I'll just look it up, the IPCC data, because the IPCC, in the latest AR6 report, it's here, right? And I'll reference this. If everyone goes to page 1856, AR6, IPC, table 1212. And what they say is there's been no detectable man-made influence on droughts, floods, all types of floods, all types of droughts, and it goes on. And tonight I will list them all. It's a big list. All the white spaces there. No human detection. So the IPCC agree with me that there's no more extreme weather on droughts. There's no more extreme weather on hurricanes. There's no more extreme weather on floods.
And yet, the publicity coming out
now,
of the APCC...
How can that happen? So I answer that tonight. How can it happen that I can use the IPCC scientific reports, there's thousands of pages of those, how can I use them, right? Because when they're clearly stating we haven't detected any influence. And the answer is this. The report that every politician reads, that's made for governments, is called the Summary for Policymakers. It is 195, a representative of each country, is normally politicians nominated to go into a room, and in front of them, I've got to photograph it on my videos. They have every sentence they're going to write as a red and a green, and until they agree green, then they pass on to the next one. So it's written by politicians who go against their own blinking scientists, right? That is a fact. Again.
So why would they do that?
Why would they?
Yeah.
All right then. Tuvalu is the most, again I deal with it tonight, Tuvalu, they said, was the most prone island, I've sailed there by the way, but Tuvalu is the most prone island in the world to sinking, right? So this last year, we had the leader of Tuvalu standing on a desk in the water, sitting in the water on a chair and a desk, saying we need more money, because it comes down to money, I'm afraid, right? But Tuvalu's grown by 2.9%. Who says that? NASA. They measured it on the satellite. And in fact, hundreds of islands in the Pacific and Indian Ocean have grown. In the Maldives, also, they had, when this came out, the scare, they had a cabinet meeting below the water in sub-aqua suits. And with a table pinned down, all the publicity stunt. We need more money, we're going to sink.
So why are they doing that?
Because they get money. Because they're building airports a metre above the water now. Right? And again tonight, I will show you all this. I go through, what I do tonight, I know this will be later than tonight, but what I'll be doing is giving a rounded picture of the whole thing. So the science, the CO2, the politics, and so on, I give the whole thing. But everything I do is backed up by my rules. I don't rely on appeals to authority. I rely on evidence, and I use proper sources, proper data, and always verified. So that's what I do. The only difference between me and others is because I've got video skills, because I've made documentaries and things, I can put it into a documentary. Right, and because of that, now I'm on television a lot explaining.
But you must acknowledge that there are lots of scientists in the world who would have a different view to you on this.
Oh yeah,
and they will be relying on evidence.
Yeah, it's such a sensible question. You ask good questions. The answer to that is dead simple. It isn't the 99 or 97%, by the way. But I've just had a clash.
I did say lots, not...
No.
I wasn't
that's
specific.
A good question. I know. I've just had a clash with a leading scientist in the UK. And what happened was I was writing on GB News Television, and he was saying that clear air turbulence is going to increase. Yes, and it causes problems because of the recent Singapore Airlines. Now, as a scientist, I look at data, don't I? So I went to the Federal Air Authority, and FAA, I think it's called in America, who monitor it all worldwide, or everything. Every incident of turbulence that causes a problem is reported. It has to be. So there's a graph of it over time, but the graph is per 100,000 hours flown. So it takes out the traffic amount. Are you with me? And it shows no pattern. So on television, I said the work is meaningless. It's a model, and it's a little bit of the world as well. Right, and it's a mathematical model. It doesn't mean anything because it doesn't check out against reality. And the heading, when they published the clip on YouTube from GB News. It said Paul Burgess put it to bed, and I did. He attacked me then personally on Facebook, and I tried to debate with him, so he cut me off. But he attacked me with all the ad hominem attacks, and then other people said, "Well, hold on here. Let's see your work." And your work didn't even allow for any change in traffic, which has been over the Atlantic quite a lot over the decades. And he wouldn't dispute. He blocked every single person who tried to dispute, because his money depends on it. His mortgage depends on it. His life depends on it. And tonight I'll feature scientists who did speak out. And you've got the same here and here. I believe the head of your utilities here, for what he said in Parliament, and I listened to, he said, if it's my personal opinion, I could see the gas station at such and such a here working in 2050. I know that man's a hostage. He's going to be there tonight. I respect him, right? He daren't say anything, right? I'm hoping that when I expose the mathematics and you have to reconsider the whole thing, and to me, I've done it. It's only when you come to realise how wrong you are, right? When I do that, I'll maybe unburden him of the madness he's being subjected to. That's how I feel about it.
Okay, let's try and find some common ground here. The Manx Utilities Authority have been given a task by the Isle of Man government, and
Correct.
that task is to try and produce more renewable energy forms for the Isle of Man. There are lots and lots of scientists around the world who tell us that we need to do this because it is going to damage the future world in which we live. And in fact, many claim that the world is going to become so warm, extreme that we won't be able to live in it.
Yeah, I know.
So why are they saying this? I mean,
money and power and control.
But then the same was said about the fossil fuel industry. So what changed? What changed between all of a sudden the fossil fuel industry was a good thing and then this is?
There's two people in this room where we're making the podcast. The CO2 level in this room must be in the thousands. We are breathing out 40,000 parts per million. 40. You breathe out. The average adult breathes out 2 pounds in weight a day of CO2, right? So if you control CO2, you control air travel, you have 50-minute cities, you control food, you control the whole life, farming, the lot. It's a grab for control.
But then the same is the case with fossil fuels.
No. How?
Well, up until the age that we're starting to move into, fossil fuels has been that most dependable and the energy source that we most depend upon.
Correct.
And everything it requires fossil fuels to operate. So
UK has got one of the highest percentages of wind farms growing in the world. We're third, I think so. How much energy, as a percentage of the total energy of the UK, is produced by wind and solar? And I'm going to use official government figures. Okay, this is UK government ministry figures at the moment. How much wind and solar? What percentage of the total CO2 is wind and solar?
And I don't know that figure.
4.8%.
And
we're over 95% fossil.
I haven't picked you up on anything yet, but this does seem to be a neat way of avoiding answering the question.
No,
and the question is quite simple: if the fossil fuel industry had so much control over our lives, because it did, maybe you're disputing that.
No, it did. No, it did.
Then how has that shifted in the last decade or so from a complete grasp of the whole energy industry for fossil fuels to now, as you suggest, climate scientists being paid to try and take control of the world through renewable energy?
No, it's not the climate scientists that's taking control. It's politicians. France is about 70% nuclear, so it isn't all like you say. But the point which you're going to make is correct in the sense that fossil fuel is totally dominated. So it's a bit like, what have the Romans done for us this now? Because it's gone from the 1800s and the early 1900s, where we had famines, storm and petulance, the lot, right? And the improvement in life. We're now at the lowest level of poverty in the world has ever been in the history of the world. We've got the highest quality of living in the world. That's what the fossil fuel industry has done for us. And I'm paid by no one, I promise you. I actually pay. On this trip here, my airfare and accommodation has been covered. That's it. I don't get paid a cent for what I do. I lose money for what I do. So so the answer to your question is, what do the Romans do for us? Oh, they built the roads, they did this, they did everything.
But the Romans, if we're using the Romans as an example, they were defeated by another force that had more powerful arguments. Basically, they had bigger weapons and whatever it was. They had an internal implosion. They fought amongst themselves, whatever it may be. There's an obvious reason why the Romans' influence dissipated. What is the obvious reason why all of a sudden politicians have ditched fossil fuel, the influence of fossil fuels, and decided to go down?
Let me give you an example. My MP where I live in Wales is the chief whip, or he is now, but been the chief whip all these years. So his job is to drive policy, to whip the MPs. Yes. So I contact him and I point out to him, there's Owl's Hatch, and this applies to every wind and solar farm, by the way, in Britain, in UK. There's Owl's Hatch. There's so many megawatt hours they produce, and they say they supply so many tens of thousands of homes. So you divide one by the other to get how many per home. That's the only calculation you need to do. Yes? And it comes out, and then you compare that. It says, according to Ofgem, 30,000 homes. You then compare that to what Ofgem say. And they say, yes, the average house is 80% gas, 20% electric. They're only supplying the 20%. So when they say 10,000 homes, what they mean is, actually, we can supply only 10,000 homes, providing 80% is coming from gas, and providing there's gas there for when we can't supply any. Yes? So that would be a more truthful statement. It's even worse than that, because they get paid at source rather than what reaches the grid, and you can have transmission losses up to 17%. So I go into detail. But your basic question, your basic thing is a credibility one. You're saying, how come this has all happened? Yes? The same with the ozone layer time, because that was all spoof as well. Look, politicians are not scientists, and not only that, they're bloody awful. My politician said, when I said this to him, and he said to me, you're a conspiracy theorist, I don't want to talk to you, because I divided one number by another. So I feature him. He's featured in the talk tonight. I feature him in Romanian Parliament when I gave a speech. I featured in the UK Parliament when I gave a talk in the committee room. I always feature him, because the man who won't divide. To prove my point, you've got to divide two numbers. He refuses to do it. Answer me why you wouldn't do it.
And part of my life, when I was much younger than I am now, I trained to be a biochemist.
Yeah.
So I am a scientist.
Yeah.
But I was also a minister, and I was minister responsible for fisheries.
Yeah.
And I used to plead with the scientists to just tell me, what decision should I make? And of course, I could never get the scientists to do that.
No.
Because as a politician, actually, you can't just go out and speak to the public and say, well, on the one hand, there's this evidence, and then on the other hand, there's that evidence. Yeah. But Minister, we elected you to make a decision. Which one is it? Are you going with this on the one hand, or are you going with the other hand? So politicians have to make those sorts of decisions. And
correct.
It seems to me crazy that the collective global politics would suddenly jump to something which is going to be much more expensive and unnecessary.
Well,
so there has to be some stronger reason than this.
Well, because they're stupid. Right, look, today the politicians are jumping back. New Zealand now, oil drilling's allowed. New Zealand now, what they call the fart tax, which they actually passed in law on animals, yeah, because the methane has been abolished, yes. Holland has turned right against it. The EU has said gas is a renewable source, yes, and so on. So what's happening now is they're dropping all the net zeros around the world, right? And so what you've got, and I do it on my videos, you've got the Isle of Man carrying on down the yellow brick road, you know, real nice keen, you know, getting the maths wrong, but carry on down the yellow brick road, really nice keen. And the rest of the world is beginning to say, whoa, whoa, whoa here, right? And that's what's happening. So there's lots of countries in the world now turning its back on the green energy revolution, right? And China must be laughing its head off. It's like selling hanging, you know, ropes to hang people with, and people hanging themselves, and they sell the rope. That's what they're doing.
Well, sadly, we have reached the end of the programme, but I just wanted to finish off with one question and see how you're going to wriggle out of this one.
I'd love to.
Let's imagine a world where somehow we manage to substantially insulate all the homes that we live in. Yeah. We manage to,
which I support.
We manage to get much more energy efficient machines, cars, whatever they may be,
support.
And we find ways in which we can produce renewable energy sources that don't rely on burning fossil fuels. Is that a bad or a good world to be in?
Have you ever heard of Alice in Wonderland? Because you're approaching it. Look, I agree on the insulation point. I agree on making everything more efficient. I agree on stopping waste. I agree on all those things. I'm an environmentalist, a really keen one since a kid. So I agree on everything like that. But in the end, we have to live in the real world. And in the real world we're living in, Isle of Man at the moment, for example, is heading down a ditch. And it's going to be a disaster for you if you carry on. And you've got to stop it. It's as simple as that. The difference in the Isle of Man, I'm on GB News a lot. That's television, and that'll increase, I think. They phone me on the way to the studio to say, "Can you come on Saturday?" and so on. And you know, I'm doing all I can to raise the flag and say, "Hey, whoa, whoa, whoa! I will win because net zero is impossible, and there's no need for it. I've got an I Love CO2 badge on because it's improved the productivity of the world incredibly. If you look at all the charts, just go to Data in the World site and look up all the growth charts for corn, cereals, rice. They're all record levels with no more land being used. Yeah, they add CO2 to greenhouses to make it grow. You know this, right? And we were at starvation levels, drought levels, down to 280. At 150, life doesn't exist anymore. Someone tried to say, maybe on a fume, or maybe on a chemical vent down in deep ocean, life may exist on chemicals. Okay, fine. What I mean is, you know, be a pretty empty world, right? No humans, no plants, nothing. That's without CO2. It's a life gas. But it's a life gas that used to be 7,000 parts per million. 550 million years ago, and gradually got reduced, goes up and down because of the ice ages, but gradually got reduced, and other factors, which I explained tonight, but gradually got reduced because the shells bury it. Limestone is 40% fossils. So the concrete building is made of 40% fossils, the concrete, yes? We drive on fossils, on the road, yeah? And it's a basic life form, but it's a temporary experiment in the history of Earth. Earth's about 4.5 billion years old. Life's a temporary thing because eventually it would bury all the CO2 and kill itself. And the danger points when the glaciation comes and sucks it into the sea, out of the air, and we dropped down to 180 last time. Had mankind not increased it now, we could have hit the 150. So, and don't forget, we're in a Holocene, which is 10 or 15,000 years long, and we've already had 11,000 years of it before the next glaciation comes, before you have a half a mile of ice over the Isle of Man, is only between now and 3,000 years away.
That was climate scientist Paul Burgess. If you liked the things he said, then please listen with an open mind to next week's programme, on which many of your perspectives will be challenged. If you strongly disagree with his views, then start a real debate with the growing numbers of people who share them. Either way, the climate debate seems to me to be primarily political, not scientific, and we all need to engage with it. For now though, I'm Phil Gorn. Go to my house and geistach rum. Thanks for listening.